Today we have an interesting panel talking about the future of retail. I think we're at a unique inflection point in the opportunities for retail. 5 years ago, we couldn't have had the same conversation, both on the B2B side, B2C side, in terms of kind of the technology that's happening upstream in the distribution channels, downstream through micro-fulfillment centers, cashier's checkout, obviously augmentation of customer experience, tons of different technologies to choose from. So I'm really excited. We have 3 different, very unique perspectives on how to augment the food retail experience, both from the lens of a business as well as a customer today. We're going to have a different format than a typical moderated session. We're going to have each person have a little bit of a deep dive. Stefan is going to give a little presentation. He's going to have a quick follow-up from me. And then we'll have a little intro from Mike, from Andreas, and then we're going to have a quick moderated session at the end and some room for questions. So here's Stefan from Shelf Engine.
Cool. Thank you, Brita. And sorry for the IT issues, but I think we're all resolved. It's the classic conference challenges. So yeah, really excited to be chatting with you guys. I'm going to spend about 10 minutes going through a few items. In terms of the presentation today, what I'm going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening holistically in the industry and what we're observing. And then I'll finish up talking about how we actually operate in the industry, what is Shelf Engine, what's happening. And this presentation, it's interesting because it's really the genesis out of a lot of questions that we get from our investors and other VCs who are always asking like, hey, where's the next innovation happening in food? Like, where are we going to see some real developments? And it's a fun conversation to have. We'll see if some of the predictions are starting to become reality. But we have kind of a unique perspective in the way that we approach it. So, wants to. Okay, there we go. So real quick, in terms of my background, I built my first company over a decade ago, scaled a food production and distribution company. And that's when I got really fascinated with what was happening in the food supply chain world. It was one of those things where you enter, and I'm sure many of you have had this similar kind of experience, you enter that world and you're like, wait, is this really how things operate? Can this possibly be how the food supply chain works? And the formatting's a little off, but the main scope that we're going to take today is essentially like, how are we seeing innovation through the lens of a P&L? So we keep talking about innovation that's happening in the food world, but really at the end of the day, it needs to have the highest impact here. So your EBITDA needs to go up, right? Like, profits need to go up for the innovation to really make sense, at least long-term profits. Now, each section of the P&L needs to have a certain impact to be able to fulfill that EBITDA, right? So we oftentimes think about revenue going up. And that's an important thing. That's why we're trying to say, like, how do we drive more traffic and how do we essentially grow the overall revenue? But there's a lot of things, like we're going to talk about cashierless checkout in a second, in terms of lowering labor, right? How could we make that impact in terms of the long term of the grocery P&L? So I like to think about this in a very visual basis. This is actually something that we take to a lot of our sales meetings to explain this. So this is your total gross profits that you can think about today as a grocery store. And there's really 2 impacts that we're going to talk about. The first one is what happens when you grow sales. And this is the new quadrant that you get added into that, right? When you essentially push that line out and you grow sales, you're generating new profits. But at the same time, if you're essentially able to reduce your COGS, you can grow this here. What's super interesting is if you do both of them at the same time, you essentially have this combination value that's driving your business. So that's why if we think about innovation in the grocery space, we got to think about it twofold. What's really going to happen at the top of the P&L and what's going to happen in the middle of the P&L. So there's a couple key parts of the thesis. The first one is because it's a highly commoditized industry, changes do spread pretty quickly once we see them adjust, because a store that's going to sit around can't sit around in the dark ages for too long because they're not going to be able to have the price adjustment or have the EBITDA catch up with all the other stores, right? There are several areas of innovation. I'm going to just touch on one specifically. There's 4 areas that we see a lot of. This is the one everybody's talking about. It's the cashierless checkout. But these, in terms of what you would call kind of like the back of house in grocery and in food service, are actually massive areas of innovation. Like what you see in distribution centers today over the last 20 years is massively different than what you were seeing 20 years ago. And you still have a lot of stuff happening in accounting and ordering specifically, where you have a lot of manual labor that's happening across the board in those 2 areas. So at Shelf, we focus on one area, and this is one area that we think is really fun and interesting, which is the grocery buyer. And we do one very specific thing for the grocery buyer, but we find that the grocery buyer has a super hard job. And what's interesting about it is that really out of every job at the grocery level, they command the P&L. So if they don't order enough product and there's holes in the shelf, that's reducing sales. And if they order too much and there's a bunch of shrink, that's really hurting on the COGS. Right, so the grocery buyer, in essence, has just a ton of sway in terms of what's actually happening in the P&L. And we focus on this very part, which is essentially, as a grocery buyer, you've got a decision to make, which is how much you're going to order. Now, when you're deciding how much you're going to order in terms of a whole set of different kinds of SKUs, different shelf lives, different gross margins on each one of those items, you essentially have to make this decision, which is a profit maximization function. So this is the more SKUs that you stock, and then here's how much profit you make. So you can think about like a single SKU, which would be like, how many baguettes am I going to stock? Okay, well, if I'm going to stock 18 or 19, that could be right here, it could be right here, it could be right here. How is the grocery buyer really supposed to know that they're hitting the profit maximization point whenever they're ordering? And if you think about it, they're literally ordering usually hundreds of items, hundreds of different SKUs on a regular basis, and some of them in thousands of different SKUs on a regular basis. And what kind of tools do they have to be able to hit that? So at Shelf Engine, what we do is we forecast exactly what needs to be ordered. And we submit it straight to the vendor for any SKU that you have. I'll go deeper into this at some point, probably in the Q&A. We're taking a bunch of data, including what's happening at the point of sale system and external data sets. We process this, and that's how we're able to deliver these forecasts for each one of these items. Now, there's a real twist to what we do. We actually guarantee the sales for the grocery store. And this is part of the thesis that's evolving and that we're seeing in terms of technology. SaaS is evolving beyond just saying like, hey, let's have a really cool technology platform that's going to help you. Now we're looking at services that are essentially saying, how do we take risk completely off of the store? So at Shelf, if you're a store that works with us, we have about 400 locations nationwide. We work with stores that are 1 or 2 units all the way up to multi-billion-dollar chains. What we do is we manage your ordering for you. Anything that doesn't sell, you don't pay for. So not only are we forecasting what you need, but we're guaranteeing it. Now, that's definitely a bit of a different model, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into what's happening there. But that was the need that we saw in terms of the buyer and what they needed at the store. And so if you can think about what they're experiencing, this is very commonly what gross profit looks like for a retailer. So this is actually straight from one of our customers. This is a cut pineapple product that lives in the produce aisle. And their retail price is $3.99. Their wholesale price, the price they buy it for, is $2.82. This is actually how much spoilage they incur It's like real. It's really kind of funny because in a lot of sales meetings, you go in there and you're like, hey, how much spoilage do you actually have? And we'll talk about the difference between spoilage and shrink, but a lot of people don't actually fully know. And this is like, we're talking close to about a third of the produce that is in most grocery stores is going to waste, right? So this is, they're making 41 cents on this product that they sell for $3.99. When they work with shelf, they pay a higher cost, but they make a much higher gross margin. And that's really the value prop that we come forward with. I'm going to wrap up a little bit faster just because I spent a little time describing everything. And I'll close it out on this idea, which is the flywheel that we're in, which basically says the more stores and the more products that we get to onboard in our system, the better our predictions are getting. And even when we launched the company several years ago, we were seeing that, hey, we can outperform a human decision by a lot. Now it's really fun to see those incremental data sets coming in and seeing the impact that is happening there. I was going to finish off with one of our favorite customers and show you guys a video. I don't have time for this. You can find it online, though. It's of Buy Right. It's really cool. We've been working with them for quite a while now. And if you've ever been to that store in San Francisco, it's a wonderful store. And we manage a good chunk of it. So I'll go ahead and close it out on that. My name is Stefan Kalb, and I'm with Shelf Engine.
So we're going to I just have two quick follow-up questions for Stefan, and then we're going to move on to the next one, and then we'll have a broader conversation. Speaking to the flywheel, you have, I think I've known now Stefan for a couple of years, and it's been really fun to see the evolution of, the product and the data set grow. As the buyers are looking at a lot of things, they're looking at sales, they're looking at shrink, but there are also a lot of external factors like, the grocery store across the street has a sale, or, it's supposed to snow. Are you able to kind of integrate those additional data sets at this point, or is that kind of next gen of the process? And do you also want to talk a little bit about, the flywheel of your two-sided marketplace? So, the bigger your retailer network gets versus the bigger your distributor / product seller, bakery, et cetera, network gets. Do you want to talk about how they rely on each other and how it strengthens the platform?
Sure, yeah, thanks a lot, Brita. I'll start with actually the second part of your question, which is essentially, hey, what's happening in terms of the virality of our marketplace? So when a grocery store gets onto shelf, they see pretty substantial impact in terms of their bottom line. But the vendors also see a really big impact because we're reducing out of stocks, and so they're seeing a growth in sales. So a lot of the time when we come into a store and we start onboarding vendors, then vendors eventually start onboarding other retailers. And so the cycle goes. So that's been a major impact for growth for us in many of our geographies. And it's really exciting to see that flywheel. You talked to me, 3 years ago, and that was a hypothesis. And now we're actually getting to see it in the marketplace, which is super exciting. In terms of data sets, there's a lot of available data sets out there. In terms of the key ones that we work with and the one that has the highest impact, which is really interesting. So how do you actually predict the flow of people coming in the store? And the number one predictor that we've seen is actually school schedules. So there's all sorts of stuff happening in town, right? So you essentially have like football games, and you have parades, and you have weather, and so forth. By far and wide, the number one impact that we're seeing is universities, elementary schools, high schools. Whenever those schools sessions are in and out, make a massive impact in terms of what's happening to the store. There's absolutely a next gen to bring in more and more data sets into shelf, but just getting those has already made a tremendous impact for us.
And one, just for the startups in the audience, I think this has been, as a pioneer in this sector, you've had a little bit of an uphill, battle in terms of educating the retailers. And, grocery retailers, food retailers probably aren't quite as inundated as the restaurant operators, but it's starting to get pretty busy. So how, obviously you have a pretty strong P&L message, but can you talk a little bit about the evolution of your sales messaging in order to get initial anchors, initial customers, where you started, any wrong assumptions in terms of how you're pitching the product, and what is really working for you today?
Yeah, good question. I think you start by hiring amazing salespeople, and I say that because one of my salespeople is sitting right over there. But yeah, I think there is an inherent challenge, especially going something with is super innovative. When we originally went into sales meetings in grocery stores and we're like AI, and they're like, "What are you talking about? Like, why are you even talking to me?" So getting that pitch down was really important. Bringing people in who were in industry and understood how to transform the pitch such that they could actually talk to the grocery stores. And now it's all reference. So they're like, "Oh, you're working with this store? Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and try something out." And that's been a really big impact, especially now that we're starting to get some of the larger name brands. So,
great.
Thanks.
All right. Okay, we're going to do a quick video now. Thank you, Stefan. On choice markets.
Choice is the perfect name for our brand. One choice, unlimited options. Choice Market is a new, modern, small format grocery concept coming to downtown Denver. It combines the operating hours, transaction times, and product diversity found at traditional convenience stores with a product selection more from local providers, using higher quality, premium ingredients. The food is homemade, from scratch, simple, clean, really good ingredients. We feel that resonates with our brand. The fact that we're 24/7. All of our food's made from fresh, sustainably raised local providers. We wanted to really have some really cool, creative sandwiches and bowls and flatbreads. We are a one-stop shop for our customers to get a variety of products that they may need for their house, for dinner that night, or really just want a snack and they're heading to the mountains. And really it speaks to the brand of Choice, so that you have the option to eat different flavors on any given night.
Mike had a base menu, and I just kind of helped develop it, tweak it here and there. We developed all the recipes together. The menu is very farm-focused, fresh-focused. There's a lot of color.
We just think there's a lot of room for innovation in this space. Whether you want to order ahead via our app, or order delivery, or just come into the store, you have that kind of omni-channel, on-demand experience. Downtown Denver is really, over the past 10-15 years, has been exploding in terms of residential density and also commercial construction. Couldn't have asked for a more perfect location for our first flagship store. My long-term goal for Choice is to expand the business and really create these micro supply chains and regional supply chains in cities across America.
So I think, congratulations, you just opened your second store.
Yes.
It must be completely dizzying in this day and age to start from scratch a tech-driven retail concept. As we already discussed, there are hundreds of different technologies. Some are very hyped up. A lot of incumbents in the space that are still trying to prove their worth. A lot of kind of humanless technology versus kind of augmenting the human experience. You got to look at all of this and then decide what you wanted to build with Choice. Do you want to talk a little bit about what technologies you decided to be foundational to the brand, to the experience, and then also some technologies that you felt did not fit for your concept?
Yeah, sure. So we kind of look at technology through three verticals or lenses. Does it enhance or improve the customer experience? Does it reduce what we call non-value added activities, or does it reduce our supply chain, our carbon footprint, basically? So really, when we started Choice, we knew we were going to lead with this omni-channel approach. So the ability to order ahead for click and collect, the ability to order for delivery, or in the store, and using self-checkout as well as regular checkout. So we knew we wanted that kind of model. And obviously there's a lot of different technologies that fit into the transaction itself. And so we really led with that foundational principle. But I would say we led with, lower quality. The technology was kind of off the shelf and not very customized because we really wanted to prove the concept before we made a major investment, because these things are a huge investment in terms of e-commerce, in terms of frictionless, in terms of all the new technologies you're seeing in the retail space. So, we've had that first location up and running for about 2 years now. We've outsourced the delivery component to Uber and Postmates, et cetera. And now we're at a point where, 30% of our sales are e-commerce delivery. And we see the traction it's gotten through the third parties. And now we're making a major investment in our own e-commerce platform and fulfilling deliveries ourselves, so we can own the data, so we can reduce the transaction fees to both us and the customer, and really streamline that process. There's a lot of learnings, and certainly we felt that was one area we really want to focus on, as well as some kind of back office stuff. Stefan talked about the margin. Obviously it's a very competitive business, and it's very low margin business, so every point counts. So we've from day one had automation on the back end for all of our invoicing, our procure to pay sides. Extra Chef actually. It's
okay.
Okay. So with 3,000 SKUs, prices change almost every day. We really wanted to have a good handle on that and make adjustments on the shelf if necessary. So those were some of the core foundational technologies we launched with. And now as we go into next year and the year after, we're going to be delving much further into the customer experience, with our own app, with the e-commerce platform, and with frictionless / AI vision checkout in the next 12 to 18 months. So.
And is that something that all of the new initiatives, is that all in-house? Are you looking at building a technology platform that can then be replicated, one for choice markets, but two potentially for other markets, or is this all internally focused?
Yeah, this is for it. We're using tying together existing technologies into a singular cohesive choice app / ecosystem, and very much it would be designed for us, because we think this idea of omni-channel, the idea is you'll be able to order ahead, you'll be able to order delivery, or you'll be able to scan your QR code when you get into choice or at one of our vending machines that we've deployed. So any interaction you have with Choice, we know who you are, what you bought, and we can then personalize offers, personalize recipes, and really own that data. And for the customer, they get the loyalty benefit of every interaction, really counting towards their loyalty. So true omni-channel kind of mobile app.
So what technology are you using on the loyalty and consumer preference side? Like how are you looking at that data?
Yes, so today we don't have a loyalty program. So this is a part of this platform will be loyalty, it'll be transactions, so the online ordering, whether it be delivery or pickup, as well as the frictionless piece. So.
Are there any technologies that you launched with in your first store that once you opened your second store, you're like, no, we're not going to do that again?
Actually, no. I mean, we've actually kept, I think in general we'll look at point of sale as, we start out with a cloud-based solution that's lower cost on the CapEx side. But certainly, as we grow and get into more locations, like an enterprise solution probably makes more sense for us. So I think that's one area we'll definitely look at in the next 2 to 3 years. Okay. But obviously changing that is very cumbersome. So for now, what's nice is these cloud-based point of sales. They're open architecture. We can integrate with all the things we need to deploy what we're going to in the next 6 months.
I think you'll see the evolution of the cloud-based platforms have a better function on the enterprise side in 2 or 3 years when you're looking. So hopefully you don't have to. That'd be great. Hopefully you don't have to leave from that.
Exactly.
So you mentioned a little bit. I mean, I saw your early days. I understand you just opened your second store. I think having a tech foundation running through your operations gives you an opportunity to collect data where traditional bricks and mortar they aren't able to collect that data. Everybody is drinking from a fire hose of data. It's hard to make that actionable. Would you have any examples of what data insights that you're using to make business decisions yourself, and then hopefully that helped you in making better decisions for store number 2. But on a kind of weekly, monthly basis that you're looking at, that you're kind of fine tuning operations and making better decisions around.
Yeah, certainly. So we track weekly customer visits. movement, sales, obviously, COGS for us, so extra chef, like what does our gross margin look like on a weekly basis? Do we need to make adjustments for the end of the month? So some of those basic KPIs. In terms of like the data of the customer, this is the biggest opportunity for us. As I think most folks know, if you're working with Uber Eats, the Postmates, they own that data and they don't share it. And so that's, again, 30% of our business where we have no idea besides the name and, we think
and
that
you're giving
person,
away 30% of your margin
orders Impossible Burger and a smoothie. It's probably this person.
Right.
Beyond that, it's pretty limited. And so for us, the huge opportunity both with the e-commerce platform we're launching, but also the frictionless checkout is you're now digitizing the data that's in the store. So who's coming in the store? How long are they in there for? What did they pick up and put back? And then you can, beyond the transaction itself, you can then get into the supply chain. So, perpetual reordering, because those vision systems know what's on the shelf, and you can, once it hits the par level, boom, automatically picks
going
up
upstream.
PO. Yeah. So for us, the implementation of the e-commerce tool and this frictionless checkout is so that really, we should know almost every customer, what they're buying, and really helping that personalize, whether it be on the website or the app itself, offers, or what comes up immediately when they log in, et cetera. Because we think it's going to enhance the customer experience and allow us to really target that customer.
And it aligns with your name as well.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
For sure. Yeah.
We're getting the thumbs up for this one.
Yeah,
we're going to hop over to Metro. Thank you.
Yep.
Hey. So look, so Metro, so I'm excited for you guys to, if you are not familiar with Metro, I'm really excited for you guys to learn about Metro because I think they were one of the first retail incumbents. They're restaurant, they're B2B restaurant focused in Europe. Andreas is going to give a little bit more detail there, but they were one of the earliest retail incumbents that I saw that recognized that innovation was really key to the success of the future business model. And they really invested a lot into a number of different innovation strategies, whether the RX, is it RX? What is the
DX, the investment? Or investment?
Fabio's. NX. So,
Food.
Yeah, NX Food. NX Food, which I'll let Andreas talk a little bit about. They've also partnered with Techstars to have an accelerator. And I think broadly, they've been really nimble about kind of thinking about innovation and having kind of early stage entrepreneurs kind of inject a lot of DNA, kind of into how they're thinking about the future. So I'll let Andreas. We'll let Andreas talk about what his day-to-day job is at the end. But first, give a little bit of picture on Metro itself.
That was a pretty good summary. You're hired. This is good. We're done. I brought one slide just because it is a little complex, as you said. But we're a little sort of the odd man out here. Number one, Metro has no operating business in the United States. We're purely in Europe. We're in Asia. We're in Russia. We're in India. We're in 35 countries. 750 plus stores, roughly $40 billion in B2B sales across food service delivery markets. Long story short, we're a combination, think Costco's meets Cisco, right? So there's big box stores catering to B2B small business owners, mostly independent restaurant owners, small offices, small retailers in those markets outside the United States, and truck rolls very similar to what you see when you see a Cisco truck coming by, that kind of thing. The company is 55 years old, so we're really sort of battling a very traditional customer experience here. And we also understand this is the 21st century. Technology has come a long way. It's incredible to hear what, the ability that you have with Choice, where you essentially just leapfrog the whole thing and start from scratch is just tremendous, right? If we didn't have that legacy as a 50-year-old wholesaler, that's what you want to do. So I'm hats off. So what we've done is we essentially said, you know what, we look at our physical retail as a sort of a product layer, right? A physical store, you come there, you shop for your restaurant, for your hotel, for your catering business. You shop at Metro Cash and Carry if you run a small office, a doctor's office, an attorney's office for back of house products, basically, and food and beverages front of house. That is our sort of store layer, and we realized we need to be much better at enabling our customers, our small business customers, in understanding how digital can use them to be more successful in the 21st century. And that, in a nutshell, is sort of the service layer that we've created on top of our retail layer, and that is ultimately about a multi-pronged approach. How can we invite startups that innovate in that space to have a meaningful conversation with us, to the degree that these startups can help our customers, restaurant operators, better understand what tech choices they have and how that helps them grow their business. We didn't want to go out and self-invent, so we've essentially partnered with Techstars out of Boulder, Colorado, and started the first accelerator program for the retail and hospitality space in Europe. And at this point, it's a leading program for early stage outside innovation, bringing them into our organization and have startups work with our customers, with our restaurants in Paris, in Barcelona, in Berlin, you name it. And then we've added to that our own in-house solution team, really making sure that we can provide our customers with tools that we know they consider useful to either create more business, i.e. get more guests coming to the restaurant, or reduce cost, back-end cost, right, operating cost. And so we started self-developing anything from website tool builders to table reservation systems to menu analytics tools, anything that an operator needs to better understand what business is he or she running and is it profitable. And thirdly, we moved into the food innovation and beverage innovation space. And with NX Food, as you'd mentioned, essentially created a program that invites startups, food makers and beverage makers, early stage, to come and work with us, start test selling their products in some of our stores in Germany and Austria. And through some of our partners, ultimately, again, to test market something jointly with our customers, right? Is this working? Is this selling? And in this case, if you're a food maker and your product is selling well throughout the 3 months test period, you will get permanently listed with Metro stores. So, long story short, a traditional retail layer and an innovation layer on top, where we become, in many ways, the virtual CTO to that long tail of our customer business, the long tail of the restaurant business in Europe.
That's a perfect way of describing it. Virtual CTO of the long tail. I love it. I love it. I think, given your point of it being an older company, I'm sure there's still some growing pains, even though you've prioritized innovation. Can you talk a little bit? You've had a handful of cohorts now go through the Techstars accelerator. Can you give some examples of either concepts or technologies that have come through the accelerator and then actually kind of shifted business practices or perceptions or approaches at the parent level?
Sure. So we've heard a lot about food waste. The problem of food waste, and looking to reduce food waste as much as we all can, and we certainly want to contribute to that factor, to that pain point, and remove it, in a sense, help remove it. Senso out of Germany is essentially one of the first companies that came through our accelerator program. They helped us generate or create what they call a fresh index, essentially the ability to map product expiration dates or product expiration information across the entire supply chain. As product, especially fresh product, gets into our stores, it's been difficult for us to keep control over the food quality as it's handed over from from farm to fork in a sense, because we have no control over that. Once it's at the store, we obviously want to make sure it's legit, but it's hard for us to control the steps prior to us. And so with Censo, again, one of the early stage startups we've been working with, we found a way to map the entire supply chain all the way into our store and make sure that we get better, fresher product, and it's not a problem in a sense.
So, for that example specifically, how do you typically, outside of the accelerator, are you looking? Do you have a corporate development program where you're looking at acquisition or investments, or is this really about a win-win, partnership? You guys are being infused with, new perspectives and technologies. They get an opportunity to have a large platform to test it out, but then they're continuing to grow and work with other players.
So our number one goal is really customer focused. It's you might be surprised to hear that our very first innovation program had nothing to do with our stores. It just didn't, in part because it's such a big problem to tackle, right? If you have 750 stores in 35 countries, we figured let's be customer focused and let's start to bring innovation into onto customer premise, right? How can we help our customers succeed in the 21st century by way of pre-qualified digital tools? And as a side note, one of the interesting things is if you speak to a single, a restaurant operator, mom and pop restaurant owner in Paris or Berlin or Barcelona, they probably don't even know what their options are, right? In many ways, you need to solve for the we don't know what we don't know piece. So if we want to innovate within the retail space, we're realizing our customers often have more questions than answers, and it becomes very quickly sort of a consultative selling approach. First, explaining what it is before you can then help them with meaningful options.
Right, and it helps your business be stickier as well.
And then it helps us to exactly. And then the second program was actually then up market back into our store. So we do now have an innovation program for our store, for in-store technology as well. But the very first thing is always the customer ultimately, and that's how corporate development thinks. It also means that we're not necessarily investing in every company that we work with. It would drastically probably reduce the number of companies we'd be dealing with. It would not be the right thing to do.
All right, I'm going to invite everybody else up here. I'll scoot over. We're going to take a quick, what are we, time check? Okay. I think we have about a couple minutes. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. I have to cut down the questions I'm going to ask, so I've had to cut out all the bad ones I wrote. Okay, so this is just kind of a big picture. I think you all talked about it a little bit in each of your presentations, but to put a finer point on it. Look, we're in a world where there are tons of different distribution models now that are bypassing local retailers. They're bypassing restaurants, even bypassing grocers. So there's a lot of direct to consumer. There are a lot of e-commerce, on-demand options. So what do you think kind of over the next 3 years are going to be either the core technologies or core tenets that retailers, traditional or less traditional bricks and mortar retailers need to embrace in order to remain competitive, remain in business?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. I think I'm a little biased because I think we've always led with the idea that the retail, the physical space, is always going to be a quintessential part of people's lives, right? People are living their lives. They're not sitting on their couch all day ordering everything and anything, right? So, and I think that's, shows in the statistics, right? I mean, 5% of all grocery sales are online. Granted, it's growing and it will continue. But for us, we really think the physical retail space will be the anchor for all these different channels, whether it be, delivery or pickup or, as we're exploring other channels such as vending machines and things of that nature that meet you really where you're at. So for us, I think, you'll continue to see this multi or omni-channel approach, both with Choice, but with most retailers. I mean, I think you're already seeing it as e-commerce platforms are now getting into the physical space because they see the the opportunity to win customers and get their brand out there. So I think that multi-channel approach is what you're going to see most retailers going for. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll just add one little piece here, which is super interesting. If you look at the evolution of grocery in the last 30 years, 30 years ago, the average grocery store had about 5,000 to 7,000 SKUs on the shelf. Today, it's about 35,000 to 40,000 SKUs, right? Like the number of SKUs on the shelf has like radically increased. And if you think about the shopping experience today, if you had way fewer SKUs, it'd probably be pretty easy to shop online still for groceries. Like I figure like myself as like fairly tech savvy. I run a tech company, but I still don't buy my groceries online. And I think there's several factors for it. And I would say that like the number one thing that we're still seeing is, hey, especially since we care about fresh, we care about choices, we want to see all the different SKUs, really hard to have that experience online thus far. And nice grocery stores just have, like good amount of SKUs, and it's a really nice shopping experience.
So to build on this, you mentioned, the sort of the tremendous increase in SKU numbers. With 750 stores, again, 35 countries, we essentially have to be able to cater to every possible palette out there, right? And that has become a more sort of discerning one, meaning there's more need to be able to deliver or have in store at the right time, the right ingredients, the right products for that particular market. And it's not that we haven't done this in the past and have done this, reasonably well for a long time. But again, one is it's an uphill battle because it's just so many more SKUs you got to deal with. And secondly, for us, it is trying to figure out, well, what technology out there is best to help us solve for that problem. And so you're making multi-million dollar, multi-billion dollar bets on particular technologies, and you need to make sure it's future-proof to a degree that it scales across our stores and has the impact that you want it to have. So for us, it's not that we have a new problem, which is to make sure we present the right product to the right customer at the right time at the right place, but trying to figure out what technology exactly is it that, what horse should we bet on to make sure that we can fulfill that promise more cost effectively.
I think I want to take a step back and talk food waste, because each of you alluded to food waste a little bit during your conversation. Do you want to, there's food rescue, there's food waste, there's a lot of different lenses at trying to kind of save food, save costs, save waste in the food ecosystem. As each of you, Stefan has an easy answer here, but as each of you are kind of looking at internally at your own platform, what are kind of the data points that you're using in order to kind of augment your food waste efforts? Either internally, are you using technologies for this? Kind of, how are you approaching food waste, and kind of how do you think about the next kind of 12 to 24 months in terms of the evolution of options?
Yeah, I mean, I think we knew going into building out Choice that waste, and especially with perishables and produce, that we carry all organic produce, for instance. So we knew that we had to really control that. And for us, we led with the model that we're going to be able to cook with whatever we hold on the front of the house. So all 30, 40 SKUs of organic produce, we have in some way incorporated into the menu. So there's basically zero waste on the produce side. And then that's really perishables in general, like our steak, our chicken breast, our dairy, all of it is stuff we use in the back of the house. So for us, that was the model that we could see working because we saw in the past, and we read about the idea of getting produce into these C-stores and these corner stores, and these folks really struggle to get through 60 avocados before it gets wasted out. So the idea that a C-store that was selling fiery Cheetos is now going to be a fresh food destination, it's a really tough sell for customers because they're not, and for the retailer itself because they're not able to get the velocities. So we knew that was going to be a problem we had to solve, and inherently in our business model, that's how we're able to cut out waste. In terms of technologies, we're talking to people like Stefan. We're talking to people. Like you guys should talk. Yeah, no, we have been, actually. It was kind of funny that we got wound up on the same panel here. But we do see those technologies. And again, the vision-based, systems to, what is the ideal reorder point, and what should we be ordering for each store? And, we have data, but it's a lot easier for the machines and computers to do it.
Totally.
Yeah, so.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a really funny story I want to share, and I totally forgot the name. It was in 1990. If anybody remembers, the president of Russia in 1990 was invited to come to the United States. It wasn't Gorbachev. Gorbachev was no longer president, right? Yeltsin, yep. So Yeltsin comes to the U.S., and he comes into an American grocery store, and he thinks that the Americans are fucking with him. He's like, this can't possibly have this many choices. This is amazing. We need to go to another store. I want to see like how much they staged this, right? Like, we live in a place where choice is really important, and when you go to the store, you get really mad if your product's sold out. So you have this like massive problem, essentially saying like, hey, don't waste any food, but don't be out, right? Like, it's kind of this ridiculous assumption, but we live in America, and that's what we have. And it puts a huge amount of pressure on folks like Choice Market, especially because you guys have highly perishables, right? So the fundamental of what we have today in terms of the American grocery store and what's transforming is essentially this like supply chain that is completely dependent on the fact that we have highly perishables and everybody wants everything available at any given time, right? We have inherently like one of the largest challenges available.
I don't think I can give you stats, right, in terms of our efforts to reduce food waste. Not that they don't exist, I'm just not aware of them. It is a key issue for us, though, and I think Metro is in a position where we actually have impact on every step of the supply chain. Traditionally, that's always been the way, right? So we ask, obviously, our store buyers to make sure that they buy on target to essentially reduce food waste by making sure what's in the store sells. Tricky, not foolproof, absolutely not. And we certainly then want to talk to the folks that are part of our supply chain to make sure that we're buying as efficiently as possible. What we're adding, or what we have been adding, is to invite our restaurant customers, meaning the folks that actually shop at our stores, to, at restaurant level, also look at food waste reduction. And we've worked with a couple of startups, namely one in Switzerland, Kitro, that essentially created a software-hardware combination to enable our restaurant customers to detect what are they throwing away in terms of fresh food, and how can they...
Computer vision and weight?
Exactly, weight and sort of product composition. And use AI to then make reference to future shopping pattern. Mind you, that could possibly mean that they're going to shop less or more efficiently at our stores. We believe that's still the right thing to do, because ultimately we win if our customers win. And so what we've done is, in terms of our approach to sustainability, and in this particular case, food waste reduction, bring in our customers, right? The restaurant folks the restaurants that you and I visit every day, if you come to Europe, how can they help contribute to that process and sort of put a backstop to this insanity?
I think we're getting shoot off stage, but one point that you said was interesting that, Stefan, if you could speak to for a second, is I think that tension of the business model where, to buy more efficiently may mean buying less, but having a better business proposition. I think probably some of your vendors, may be in that position, but I think, do you want to speak a little bit about, kind of the potentially buying less of certain things, but also the optimization of buying more for other categories where they're not buying as much? Yeah, I think that's often. I've definitely in talking with retailers and startups have kind of heard that as the boogeyman of we're going to reduce sales volumes if we're trying to optimize for waste. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? Yeah,
sure. And I'll try and make this really fast because I know we are getting shoot off stage. But basically, there's just massive tension happening in grocery across America, right? Where grocery stores are having this conversation of essentially saying, hey, I want to make sure I have product on the shelf because if I'm out of stock, I know that a certain percentage of my customers won't return. And they've studied that a bunch, and they're really worried about that. And on top of that, their basket size is smaller. If you look at Instacart today, 1/10 of their items they can't stock in their baskets. So if you're buying stuff on Instacart, 1 out of 10 items you're not going to get in your basket. That's how big of a problem it is. But at the same time, a lot of these guys have on their highly perishables 30% spoilage rates, right? 1 to 5 day shelf life items, like 30% spoilage rates, which can you imagine what that does to the P&L? So Brita is essentially talking to us about exactly like, this is our pitch. This is how we go. Actually, Mike, if you want to talk right now. But this is it. This is how it goes, right? So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys.
Yep. Thanks, guys.